Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, good morning. And I would like to start our deliberations because today it's not only it's only the last of our holidays. This is the old New Year, and I'd like to congratulate you on that occasion. But today, with the expert year starts, and traditionally starts with the Gaidar Forum. And so now we are the participants of this beginning and this gathering. So the participants who have been participating in the Gaidar Forum for many years, so they couldn't fail not to pay attention to the fact that that the relations and the main points that we dedicate our plenary session today, it revolves around the kind of unlikely attempt to address this issue, because it's social problems, social development. So this is the pivotal part, social policy, and in different industries. So they usually they kind of move towards the end of the forum or to the middle of the forum. But today we start with the discussion of the most important burning issues, social economic issues, social politics, social policy, social agenda. And so that bespeaks the importance of social issues and problems, because now they are in the center, so they're on the top list of the political agenda of the Russian state. And that's quite understandable, because now we're living through so yet another social and economic crisis, and the social problems come to the fore. And so due to their importance in modern society, and due to the fact that the crisis, and we're participants and witnesses of this crisis, so this crisis sets different challenges and issues in this environment. And before we celebrate the expert New Year of 2016, we have every reason to speak about some results and some of the social development of recent times. So certainly painted in crisis tints. And certainly we'll try to address the most important issues on the agenda, and like to devote a few words about the results of the social development achievements in recent years, because not only 2015 but 2014 and in some positions even 2013, those were the years where so there were a lot of manifestations of crisis processes in the economy and in the social sphere as well, and so that became apparent starting from 2013. I'd like to remind you that talking about crisis, so this is the fourth crisis that the Russian population is living through, and that the Russian population is the middle of. So the first crisis in the 90s, that's a lengthy crisis of the transformation, so with the big gamut of social implications. And then the currency crisis of 1998, that was short in terms of time, but very acute concerning its social manifestations, especially in the industries that were directly impacted by that crisis. So then 2009, 2010, that's yet another economic crisis that was related to the implications of the world economic crisis. So then 2009 was in full swing, but in 2010, 2011, so we still felt the implications and impacts of that crisis. So now we're coming to 2014, 2015, and this is already a structural, internal crisis of the Russian economy. And the fourth in number. In spite of the fact that the macroeconomic, structural, and external factors that led to those crises in all four enumerated cases, so although they were all different, nevertheless the social underpinning, the social background, so they were the first to suffer. And the social implications, and so the social stratum was the hardest to be hit during all four crises. So certainly they were similar, so there were some differences, and we'll talk about them later. And I would like to move over to the most important trajectories that determine the social development, like in the previous crisis. So the most important social challenge is definitely the risks of increasing poverty of the population, which has to do with reduction of income, and the quality of life is deteriorating as well. So these charts show that this crisis impacts adversely these two components, and especially very dejecting. So this trajectory of salaries, because 9% reduction of salaries in 1 year. So we have to admit this is very dire and very considerable, because the salary, so that is why the level of living standards and the quality of life of almost half of the people who work, so related to the loss of so then the family transfers, and so how the patient suffered from the diminishing salaries, and that's a direct impact. And so then it's small surprise that against the background of this negative dynamics, and but then another very important point, by 6% down, and so the most recent, it will be about 5%, which is the compared to last year, which is a GDP reduction. And so small wonder that this risk that is always a litmus paper of the social condition of the state, so the indicator of poverty, and so then so this indicator of poverty goes up, and compared to 2014, so this indicator of the poverty growth vis-a-vis 2014 is 2% up. And so then the formal indicators of poverty, so the reduction of the share of the population whose income is shrinking, so is less beyond the poverty level, subsistence level. And so because in the last 10 years we have achieved considerable successes, so when we see this comparison, this 2% so growth of the poverty level index is very disenchanting and disheartening, because actually that throws us back to 2010, and so then and 2% growth of the indicator of poverty, we have to admit, is very considerable and alarming, and so it means that the system of social protection, social security, and that's what we can conclude, and the system of economic relations related to the quality of life is very shaky, unstable, so because we have not made a very good head start in the crisis years in order to ride out the waves now. And but I'd like to pay your attention to the fact that although that usually so the poverty level always goes up during crisis periods, it's only natural, because so the modern methodology that we use, because we measure it at per capita income, that's how we evaluate the poverty level, and so and the number of people so whose poverty level just goes beyond the subsistence level, and the poverty level, poverty line. But crises have different nature, and all these crises, so they actually we can compare different crises and compare the situations, which is the social economic conditions. So the two neighboring crises, 2014 crisis and the crisis of 2009-2010. So if we draw a line of comparison, try to juxtapose how similar or how different they are. While in the previous crisis, so we managed to keep the salary, certainly owing to the efforts of the government, because serious efforts were made, and so we managed thus to maintain it against the avalanche drop, and so the salaries were supported, and but then against the background of that crisis, so we managed during that crisis, so we managed just to maintain the people's incomes. How? Because of the decisions that were made in the pension system. because the pension system 2008 and 9 went hand in hand with innovations in the pension sphere. And so the pension rights implementation, etc. And so we managed just to support the level of pensions during the last crisis. That certainly prevented so the reduction of people's incomes. So now, this crisis is completely different on that account. And so then the biggest reduction is the real salary reduction plummeting, and so then the level of pensions we managed to maintain at the same level, incremental level as the incomes. But we understand that the risks lurking down the road because so then we do not increase the pensions well enough, and then if we fail to index the pensions next year, that will certainly mean the reduction of the people's incomes. And so, but I'm not. We know very well, and we'll talk more about that. So that the decisions in the pension sphere of 2009 that started as part of the implementation of the pension reform 2010, so allowed to bring the level of the pensions to a higher level, more acceptable for the country, and but at the same time, so that generated a number of challenges for the economy of the country and the social system of the country, and that we need to address today. And so what is the difference? So what is the response of the Russian population? Because the change of consumption, a pattern of consumption, and certainly evaluate their material condition as getting worse. But what makes it, what we can liken one to the other is that so that's a savings amount actually, and so when knowing that the crisis is not going to end anytime soon, so people are saving money, so they're just creating this safety net, this cushion. And so on the one hand, it says that so that the incomes certainly are not plummeting in a critical manner because there is still room for having money, and so because the money is still there, but people are afraid to invest money, so they're saving, they're sitting on the money, and they're afraid to spend it and saving for the future. And that says that the social institutions and the social behavior of the people so is very limited. So the freedom of movement of the Russian people is very limited. And then so the formal indicators of the market indicators look not so bad. But we, as in previous crises, we don't see this avalanche like increase of unemployment. So we don't see, because this is the specifics of the Russian market starting from the 90s. That out of two parameters, it's either so release and growth of unemployment or reduction of salaries. So the Russian labor market has always selects the model of reduction salaries and supporting high level of employment. And so this is the preference. And formally in the Russian labor market, so we can see the repetition of the same picture. So then the Russian model of the Russian labor market so proves its viability and its robustness, and so which so the indicators, so the labor unemployment is low, and which is good, but we have to pay a high price for the bad things happening in the economics, failures in the economy of the country, and so the salary is the direct implication, the reduction of the salaries of all the mistakes in the Russian economy made recently. And I would like, before we move over to the discussion with our participants, I'd like to ask a couple of questions myself. So these are the process. This is the status quo. And so how do we respond to this? It's with the help of social policy. So regional systems of social security, social protection. In our paradigm, it's what we mean. So first, social responsibility of the regions. of the regions. So how they respond to the crisis challenges. We need to say that in many years, in course of many years, we have spoken repeatedly that we need to move so to make the social protection in a targeted manner, and but it's only was an intention. So because this targeted social protection didn't work well. But in 2014, so many regions said that they were going to implement the regional programs in a targeted fashion. So social protection, targeted fashion. So personalized fashion. So, but what is personalized fashion of providing social help, social support? Because when talk about it being targeted, because we need certainly just to find the most vulnerable groups of people who can resort only to the social support and help. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to address their issues. As to the most vulnerable strata of the population. So usually is stopping indexation or lower rate of indexing or a refusal to honor certain social obligations or reduction of the volumes of payments. But this is not the something that the social experts wanted to achieve and appeal to people to move over to in the social policy. This is not the way the social system should work in a targeted fashion, because usually it's just a saving money, and it's not a targeted nature of social protection, social security, and the social sanity of the Russian population actually bespeaks the danger of the increase of social danger, and social issues are mounting and they are snowballing. And so we can see that, but at the same time, so there are no so dramatic feelings, and so I would say that there is a negative stabilization, because then the fulminant nature of the crisis that occurred and unfolded in 2014, 2015, and so the crisis was really very rapid in its nature, but people. All these issues that we raised and monitored, or the social feeling of being protected, and so everyone now understands that crisis is for a long period of time, is not going to end anytime soon. And so then they should not expect for any other positive moves and improvements on the part of the state in the area of social protection. And so people understand that there will be no helps coming, and so then they understand that there is a stable negative prospect, but not given to despair and not given to any calamities. So people view the situation with utter equanimity. Because everyone in the media, in the government, they're afraid of the social unrest, social explosion, but this is not something that we should be afraid of, because this negative stabilization, robust negative stabilization, so is much better than a quick and negative response of the population to these. To these factors of the decreasing and weakening system of social protection. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tatyana, Minister of Labor and Social Protection of the Russian Federation, because he is the minister who is responsible for the social development, and so he's responsible for the processes that I spoke about. At the same time, I'd like to ask Mr. Tatyana, so with a request to share with us his ideas, not only concerning the issues what the government can do along those lines in order to prevent, in order to improve or to act on these changes. But I remember very well, so then a great deal of experience that was acquired by Mr. Tatyana during the crisis 2008 and 9. And he worked very proactively and energetically so along the lines of the developing crisis, and we managed to avoid many social implications, but at a high price. And so how do you view the situation? What's your assessment of the situation? And so do we have any resources, and where we stand, and what's going to happen? And so what can we do to use these resources to stop the further escalation of the social crisis? I'd like to very briefly talk about what the government offers to do and what has already been done on the initiatives that we've been working on. And so we spoke about the measures. You spoke about them, the measures taken. But it's not that tragic. So you painted it with black paint, and it's not. And because look at the indicators that we have in such a sphere as demography, for example. So very responsible. So the area of responsibility of the Russian government as well, because we talk about the targeted nature of social protection. But I think that the main priority number one that we should never lose sight of, in spite of any crisis, just evolving, developing future in the past, is to keep the stable and predictable nature of the growth of the population. So the demographic policy is the order of the day. And the government so started on this policy in the 2000s. So priority is the family with children, 2 children per family. And this is very important. So because if we talk about what good we have, what good points we have, so that's one good point. And then owing to the measures that the government has been taking, and the regions including, so they made a lot of efforts, and we can see the positive dynamics of so birth rates are improving, and the death rate is decreasing. And so then in the last 11 months, so we got a natural surplus of birth rate over death rate, and 24,000 babies have been born over the death rate, and in spite of the fact that the number of women of fertile women is decreasing, still against the background. So we managed just to keep that line above the surface of the water, and so the mother capital has been decided to maintain for the next coming years, several years. And so the more than 800 billion rubles. So we're going to extend 800 billion rubles. So will be applied to the mother capital for the next 2 years. So this program will be extended by 2 years to motivate mothers to have more kids. And so because we can see the targeted nature of the social protection system, and at the same time, so we need to reframe and slowly move over to different systems of payments, not only just to save the budget money, but because we need to concentrate our efforts to support the lowest income strata of the population, so those who can't work, so we need just to it's not so much about the targeted nature, and because we spoke about that. So all payments, all benefits, and everything that we make so are established in a targeted nature, personalized nature. So it could be the war veterans, disabled people, mothers, fathers, and so every support, financial support, is given in a targeted nature, personalized nature. Everyone, I say that. But certainly, just I'd like to remind you that last year we, owing to the joint effort of a number of ministries. So there's been a lot of discussions in the government between the regions, and the regions. So they identified new issues, new challenges. So they started out this discussion. So then the measures of support to the population, they're changing these approaches, and the regions were the initiators then and they spoke. So let's cancel certain types of support. Let's add some types of support. But the analysis so went to prove that the regions have free hands in order to deal with the social payments and benefits, and so there is no hurdles. Their hands are not tied, so there are no restrictions, no limitations. They can do whatever they want with the money they have, and so it says that in the regions. So they have so huge payments that is set that actually duplicate the payments at the federal level, but the regions don't pay attention to the social groups of people that they should pay more money. So because they're saying that so they are saying that there don't have enough financing for that. But then one of the regions, so they pay additional money to all salaries, so 1,000 rubles, and they spend 600 million rubles a year, so without any reason. So then the federal appropriations are there, so for the pensions, and then they pay each person in the region another 1,000 rubles. What's the point? And so, okay, why they do that? So, and then they're saying that they have a dearth of money to pay for other social programs and to finance other social programs. That's why when we support the regions, so they need to take stock of what they have, what they pay. And I'd like to give special thanks to Batalina, Olga Batalina, because she's the head of our committees. So a lot of serious discussions have been conducted as to what should be done, cannot be done, and so we try just to address the most challenging issues. And so then the regions, the federal regions, should move over to the principles of providing support to the most vulnerable groups of people, to the most, and to redistribute the resources to for those who really need the improvement in their financial condition, and thus we'll be able to avoid so rapid so reductions in people's incomes. And the regions, starting from this year, have this in full, this capability to pay. And so we are working with the regions now to streamline this effort and to remove this uneven, so unequally tilted playing field, and so to rearrange the payments. And because we have, for example, then lots of the oversight committees say, for example, you cannot change that, you cannot cancel this. So the local oversight authorities, controlling bodies say. So then the Kirov Oblast, so we're helping the Kirov Oblast to take the case all the way up to the Supreme Court in order to take a ruling in favor of the region, and to cancel the requirement of one of the controlling bodies to stop certain payments and to the people. That is why I think that we have a lot of room for improvement at the federal level. At the same time, we need to so then so the State Duma and the Council of Federation, at these levels, we've taken a decision that the money that could be saved by redistribution, so should be targeted for social programs. No, this is the norm of the law, and so then when redistribution will be in favor of so programs related to family support. And more targeted approach, personalized approach to the most so needy strata of the population. And so then certainly we talk about other ministries involved in it. So they're more directly involved in those issues. So then housing construction is another issue, which is we've been discussing this issue of housing construction for a long period of time. And but there are category benefits and exemptions along different preferences.
And that's exactly where, as we think, these are federal benefits, and the federal budget spends approximately over 120 billion rubles. And I believe those benefits provided according to non-estimation of any income. So definitely it has to do with the background of the person, but there's a way to reformat this system. Family income, yes, indeed. We were requesting to do it according to the income of the taxpayers. And yesterday we had got the consent of the government that in 3 weeks all the social payments and social grants and the federal benefits would be indexed, raised by 7%, which is the difference between the actual inflation of 12.5 and 5.5 in the forecast. So the 7% raises since 1st of February is the accurate number. That's going to be done according to the government. So all the social payments except the maternity capital will be indexed. So we believe that we shall be able to stabilize the situation partially, and we have decided that next year this indexing will happen as well, but not according to the forecast, but by the actual increase of prices. So next year, so last year is 7% indexing, and next year, according to the actual inflation in 2016. That's how we're going to use this model. We believe it to be more accurate, as we were using the forecast. We used the forecast before, and we wouldn't always be precise. So how much of additional expenditures this year? So let me answer, let me take this. Yesterday we got this index, is approximately, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be wrong, but it's approximately 30 billion. But this was provided, this has been provided, but we were calculating according to some smaller, a lower index, some 6.4, and inflation turned out to be slightly higher. As for the salaries, it's up to the employers. And here I would like to draw your attention to the issue that is still unaddressed. And we believe that we need to think about it, start thinking, because the real salaries kind of shrink. And the question from the labor market is what's better. For instance, in Spain, 20% that we're getting of unemployment, and the salaries are not as flexible as you would wish. And a majority of the population has temporary contracts. But in this case, we're going to have much higher unemployment rate, and all the benefits and social assistance. People will turn for them in many cases, and it's going to be snowballing. So that's why we're going to keep doing what we have done. We're not going to support everyone. It's not going to be kind of carpet bombing when we would spend some 40 billion a year. And in many regions, we would provide subsidies for small businesses. And we are trying to concentrate in the very points, in the very issues where we see the high probability of negative development, like industry support and support of large or relatively large companies, and the regions probably in the car industry, in the railway cars industry, technical industries, construction, in some areas like Tver, Altai, Samara, Tatarstan, and in 18 regions totally. So we would not just distribute the money to everyone, but we would make pointed efforts and finance the very issues that could create social unrest. We have never been talking about cutting people, laying off. So yes, sometimes we shrink the working hours, but let's look at the Avtovaz. When we started working with it, it's 120,000 employees. Now it's slightly over 40,000 employees. And take other large plants who restructured and reformatted their production program and the HR programs. So they really treasure the personnel with relevant competences, but on a totally different level of efficiency and training. And so we would provide this support and in upgrading, modernization, training, optimization. And for all the companies that participated, they had to optimize the personnel. Well, we never tried to make a kind of very large layoffs in a short period of time. We never would get rid of, say, half of the employees, but we tried to prevent the social unrest when there was a difficult situation. So we would really be extremely cautious, careful, and sensitive about the measures and just carry out the program step by step, very seamlessly. Last year, we spent some 4 billion rubles on those programs, and they were quite efficient. And probably the regional experts would complement my story about this matter. But speaking about the salary level, and yes, it's going down, and it is very sad. And today we have no chance to raise the salaries just like we did during the last crisis. But I remind you that at that moment we were switching to the new industry salary remuneration system, and the decision was had nothing to do with the crisis. It was made even before the crisis, and just during this change, the crisis struck, and this 30% raise just coincided with the crisis. So probably it was payment for the fact that during the 90s we had very low pensions, and then we really made a breakthrough, and now we are on an adequate level, and we are trying to support the pension system. And last year we used the inflation indices for the pension, and this year we decided to raise the pensions for the working pensioners by 4%. For the non-working pensioners, there will be no indices, because we need we need to help the people who only use pension as the means to survive, who don't work. So we shall probably have another indexation in the budget, another raise in the budget. At this moment, we cannot say for sure. We shall be looking at the situation. We shall be working with the deputies and we shall be looking at this situation with the salaries level, and this 4% raise will show us to what extent we could comply, we could make this raise, and how the inflation, the real practical inflation, will match the expected one. And probably we shall have to revise the budget. It will depend on many, many factors. And unfortunately, I'm in no position to give you an accurate forecast right now. But the budget actually provides for this change and opportunity, for this alteration. And let me say a few words about the sources of financing. So, look, we keep saying, for the last few years, maybe for the last 10 years, we've been saying that we cannot increase the burden for the business because this is the sacred cow. It creates jobs. So we shouldn't raise taxes. We shouldn't overload the business, overburden the business with taxes. I believe this is a very good ideology. But looking at the real income today, we probably need to think. Can we increase the burden of utility payments or capital repair and renovation? So somehow we remember about the targeting in the financial aids and social aids. Probably we should definitely send to make sure that it's the ones who need the aid will get it. But we say we don't have enough money for raising pensions, so we have deficit of pension fund. But why, instead of 26% to everyone, each and every one, we decrease the tax to 22%, and we probably 400 billion a year, is what we are getting. So probably someone needs it, someone doesn't need. So we need to differentiate how we could be targeting the social support. As a ministry, we shall be doing it, but probably there are industries and the industry ministries that should take care of it. But why, treating the population, we have different targets group. But speaking about the businesses, we have no differentiation by targets group. For instance, all the companies, IT developing companies, get all the beneficial tariffs, additional tariff. Probably why don't we provide some subsidies and use clear and transparent rules for providing those subsidies? Because we are saying that probably these subsidies can be distributed wrongly. We don't say we have rules, so we have formulas approved by the government. Why can't we do it? Why we just award everyone with the same benefits and tax exemptions? So when we talk to the Ministry of Defense, we are on the same wavelength with the Ministry of Finance, and the system has to be changed. We don't have a single cent in the deficit of the pension fund that could not be explained by the rules, laws, and decisions. So we have early pension because we have 11 million people who are entitled to an early pension age. So we have special tariffs for special jobs according to the job hazards and professional hazards, but it does not really make up for the costs that the pension fund has to incur. we couldn't make them higher, those tariffs, for instance, because we have this maximum rate of 9%, and the employers keep saying that it has to be lowered, so it has to be addressed. The actual rate to make up for the additional expenses of the pension fund for early pensions is approximately 15%.
Но это не означает, что нам не нужно думать о том.
It's double, virtually it's double, but we cannot just drop them, early pensions and special cases. So we really need to think about it and make every effort to work out the proper conditions. So I believe we have very high volume of internal resources that would allow us, without any additional financial strain and burden, to gradually reduce transfer costs that we have created with our own hands, and it will allow us to raise the proper pensions without any additional financial sources. I thank you. Thank you. We certainly thank you, Maxim Anatolievich. We do understand. Yes, we do understand that there are so many problems you have to address. And today we shall discuss another innovation in our session. And I'm so grateful to Aleksey Kudrin for coming. He initiated. He did not just agree to come, but he initiated. He volunteered to come. So, and I understand that Aleksey Leonidovich will help us to raise issues, to discuss the must-do things, how to ensure sustainable social development, but how much it will cost, and what is there that we can afford, what's there we cannot afford. So the same question that I asked Maxim Anatolievich is that in the previous crisis on 2008, we were facing different macroeconomic and domestic conditions. So now the crisis is totally different, and we don't really understand how it's going to evolve. So you probably have a fresh view on those matters. So allow me to pass you the floor, because we want to understand what's realistic and how a social policy will be feasible or not. I would like to thank Maxim, because his ministry has been doing a lot, especially during the crisis. They have been instrumental in helping us overcome. And I would like to welcome all the attendees and participants. I helped to arrange the forum program, and I'm happy to see the real site for discussion and bringing your concerns straight to the government from experts. So I would like to welcome all the government members here at this event. So I came here because I believe that the social issues have a structural nature, and they're accumulating in the society and economics. I would name maybe 3 dozens of issues, like the too much state ownership, so insufficient market conditions, competition, improper competition, efficiency, dependency on oil, and excessive obligation, excessive commitment in the social area that we have accumulated during the fat years, the budget structure, and but the social issues and social protection, social assistance are the key 3 issues that require structural reforms. They should be the priority. We have special situation, demographic situation, very unfavorable demographic trend, and we feel them impacting the number of retired people and the lesser number of active population. So we have we have 1 million less active. So next year we shall have 1 million less of actively working people, and the ratio between the retired people and the working people by the 2030, the working people and the retired people will be equal in number. So there'll be 50-50 correlation. Again, poverty, and this is a real cost on economics and poverty. We want our state to be socially oriented. I advocate the socially oriented state, but in spite of all the commitments and assurances that we shall support all the social costs, is just talk. But we need not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. We see the growing poverty, very sharp, very noticeable growth of poverty, that in 2008, the number of poor people shrank because of those social and fiscal benefits and aids and financial support, when we would support the employment and social groups, specific social groups and pensions. In 2008, 2009, the poverty, the real income of the population has not dropped, and the number of poor has not increased. But today, the situation is totally different. The situation has become very acute. How are we going to address it? With the social support that all the budget systems provide. We say we shall be meeting all our obligations, but the number of poor people will be growing. And we need to know how to answer this question very precisely and accurately. And coming back to the socially oriented state, I can tell you that the models we consider, like those in Europe, where GDP per capita is twice as high as in Russia. The economic potential is much higher, and the tax burden, as a rule, is at least 40% of GDP. So we have 37 with oil companies and 30 without oil companies. So again, the export duties and the oil and gas taxes, all those two main components, so constitute for the tax income of 7%, between 30 and 37. If we want to change the model, then we need to increase the tax burden. But I believe that the socially oriented state is rather a populist slogan, is still a declaration rather than a real situation. We need to go our own way. We need economic growth of 5% a year to support it. It will give us the opportunity to grow the real income annually and higher resources that we can gradually allocate for social support. We cannot, without raising the GDP, we cannot take these heights. So speaking about combating poverty, some 60% of this effort is economic growth, and 30 to 40% is a matter of quality of social protection, social support. And the social support quality is of concern to us, just like economic growth, which we're going to address. But the social support and organizing is what we have to address. So how does it work? Considering the demography and the demographic situation and the quality of social support. So let me take the good pre-crisis year, 2008. And I looked how many 2015, how the budget structure changed, or rather, the non-budget state funds and the social policy. It does not include the salaries. So the social support does not include the salary. It's just social support. So it went up from 9 to 14.3. So 5% growth. So you see how much we went a long way to raise the social support. Out of them, 4% was targeting on supporting the pension system, and the decision that were made back in 2011 and further indexing. So out of those 4% out of 5, approximately 2% just by raising taxes. Social fees are not exactly taxes, but by nature, it is a still higher burden on businesses. It means that out of the 4% growth into the pension system, 2 accounted for the higher taxation. So if we do nothing, then we have to add another 1% tax to support the pension system. And I believe that the trend is that once we're not raising the pension age and other types of restructuring, so within the next 4 years, we shall have to raise GDP by 1% to support the social system. So in today, 2016 to 2020, we need to raise GDP by another 1%. This is definitely present a much higher burden for business, because I don't know where else we can underfinance. You see, education, healthcare, we save as much as we can there, but this is human capital. This is our future. This is our competitiveness. This is the very economic growth that we need, that we strive for. So it is a vicious circle. Now, if we raise the support of those social items, we shall increase the burden on the businesses and productive budget articles and the human capital. And hence, we shall decrease the GDP. But without it, we shall not be able.
При этом
We shall not be able to address, to achieve what we want. So how did we manage to increase the social support, and in particular the pension system? Through investment by 2%, the state decreased investment by 2%. So what was the main reason for reducing the investments? The state policy. This is another factor why we're not supporting the growth. What else? Purchasing equipment and technologies for our state requirements, and buying services for the public needs. We here reduce the public consumption here and redistribute to social support. And this raise of social support with a negative impact to economics in the budget structure does not facilitate the economic growth, and it requires rethinking, because we are on the getting near the edge, you know. So in 2004, when I came, I told the president, so we understand the demographic trends, so we understand what's going to happen in 5 to 7 years. We We know how we can
And
calculate
so
the
we need
issues.
just to look into the future somehow. So let's just increase the pension age. And so we have to announce it because we cannot do that overnight. So then then you announce it, then you prepare for a couple of years, and then you add 3 months, half a year, 1 year, and then jointly with a serious approach, the support that will be announced. So then additional payments. So then the raising of pension age will be taken to heart by the nation. But so there's a saying, so vis-a-vis the age of death, the mortality, so the lifespan. So that now just lifespan is less than the pension age. It has nothing to do with it. So we know the pension age is close to the dying age. So even the doctors, I'm not talking about politicians, so they're using it. They say that that we cannot increase the pension age because the lifespan is not long enough. So it's gone up substantially. There are two unrelated facts because because lots of mortality in the younger age, local conflicts, morbidity, accidents, etc. So we're not talking about those who become pensioners. It is just taken outside the context. Should be taken outside the context. And so this is so that's a good example. Like if we spoke only about that. About only the lifespan, so then we would have no pensioners. So then everyone would be living just as long as the lifespan. So this is an unprofessional approach. Is talking about the life expectancy. So that's a populist pronouncement. No more, no less. And so then concerning the life expectancy being as long as the pension age. So certainly we need to increase the pension age, and everyone understands now that the pension age. So we're not doing it for anyone, but we're doing for the pensioners because the pensions will stand to gain. Because they retire, because we need to concentrate the resources to pay the pensions, and so to maintain this supplement factor. So then there is this very simple calculation logic, because we won't have taxes in future. So there won't be enough taxes. And so where do we get the money from? Where do we get the additional resources? To increase taxes? But if you take from other items of the budget, so this is the accumulated part of the pension. It's been designed not because. So let's find a different way just to accumulate pensions. So let's set up new accounts and just put money in there. It's because in future we won't have those resources, because we need just to start saving money now for the future generations of pensioners. And so then during good years, during the fat years, I can share with you that so then 30-year seniority, for example, for the first time, so those who participate in this accumulated approach to the pension, so by 2050, so then about 23-24% of additional pension, so on top of what the government will provide. Do you want to abandon it? Because in the pension system, all the pension reform should be oriented around a certain target, certain aim. So we don't want just a person once he retires, just so his salary immediately, so his income immediately drops by 50 or 30% immediately. But like in civilized states, so he would be getting just to get to 60 to 70% of his last salary when he was still employed and did not retire, and not just only 30%. Certainly there's in other countries. So this is a voluntary pension systems that the entire population, this culture, developed institutions trust. So because there's a mandatory plus voluntary. But in Russia, people don't think about pension. They have not learned to think about their future pensions. But in 30 years' time, so they will start asking, so where my pension is, so why? during the good years of the country's existence. So we have just to plummet 60% of our salaries once we retire. So they will start asking these questions in 30 years' time. So that's why we need to think about this, because a pension system is long-term outlooks, long-term view, strategic view. Because we need to start thinking now what's going to happen in 2030, 2050, and so we cannot just make snap decisions and take rapid, unexpected changes concerning the accumulated part of the pension. And so then some key issues we mentioned. So I heard one problem verbalized. So the problem of actively employed. So because they were saying because of the fiscal situation, so support to the pensioners, maybe to pay, so not to pay the basic pension to the pensioners who still work. So my attitude is circumspect. And because it works out that the pensioners who have still strength and stamina and work, they want to work, so their salary will be less than by the amount of pension. So because it actually demotivates in absence of the lack of labor, and so that's why this is not fair. So then there is another argument against it. So they say that they provide pensions only for those who cannot work, who are unable to. But if you work, so then you will have just to have your so salary reduced by the pension. And but I do not. So this problem might eventually raise. So then the pensioners will have to decide. But I would not go for it. Because if we increase the pension age, then we won't have to address this dilemma. So whether just to pay and not so the working pensioners and not to pay them the pension. Then Maxim Anatolievich was saying about the targeted nature of special benefits and for some businessmen. So you started out saying that so there is a deficit in the pension fund, and it's formed so not only from so special benefits, it's formed so it's about 45% of its pension fund is the benefits, and only some of it related to benefits. I was an adherent of the point when to introduce the calculation of benefits and a transfer of compensation to the pension fund. Every time when they allocate additional benefits, they need to be calculated, and so because it will be at the expense of other so item of expenditures, so to make sure that these benefits will be targeted and efficient, provided to the pensioners. So small businesses. So how to support small businesses better? Through the funds, this target subsidies, the funds of target, or more transparent, equal distribution of these subsidies by way of providing the benefits. And I think that for small businesses, it's much better to do it by way of benefits. So the pension payment. So they have the right. They get the right to get their pension, to draw their pension. So then, and the subsidies of the states are coming, support this category of small businesses, so they have the right to a pension. So then, in other categories, we need certainly to scrutinize the situation vis-à-vis subsidies. Because for this sector, so IT sector, by the way, so remembering about the priority of this segment, so the subsidy may be done through the pension payments, because it's highly qualified, high salaries, highly qualified professional work, etc., and so on, and the payments are quite high. So that certainly can be discussed, but and I do not think that the benefits that are compensated by the budget incorrect. No, because I think that in many cases that's the way we should proceed. But certainly we need to be in some cases more targeted, more personalized, social subsidies to companies. and industries. And then a couple of more points that we mentioned earlier. So salaries, so reduction of salaries, real salaries by 10%. That's a very serious impact, adverse impact. And I'd like to remind you that every year, so at every forum here in St. Petersburg, I kept repeating that after 2008, at the time of the world crisis, I kept saying that so the world was so there were lots of bubbles in the world economy. So in all countries, and Russia actually so had their own bubbles. So then certainly the oil dependence, commodities, increasing of the mass of money in the economics to 40–50% a year, so the increase of the money supply. And so that actually allowed to increase the salaries, and the labor productivity was lagging behind, but it all just was on the basis of the oil dependency, because this oil commodities dependency is manifested in many ways, in many areas. So when we start spending money, so they immediately create additional demand in the economy, at the same time remembering that the efficiency and the effectiveness of the Russian economy is not growing. And so this interdependency has taken shape, and so then big state monopolies became part of it. I remember the state monopolies, so they would come to me and say, so please let it be part of the directives of the policy of our national company, the steady increase of the labor, of salaries, because if we do not increase them salaries, then they will immediately migrate to another industry, and they will abandon our work, etc., and find employment elsewhere. So if we can make it in order, so they were asking me. And then eventually the state said, so we're going just to increase in the budget sphere by a certain percentage, so the salary increase that will be dependent on the growth of labor productivity, and that's how we're trying just to end the oil. Well, it depends. We cannot increase salaries anymore without the concomitant increase of the productivity of labor, and that's the whole point. And eventually, so inevitably, we get this correction. With that, we get this adjustment, because now just one is running neck and neck, productivity and salary. So because it's much better just to do this, but at the same time, just to avoid the plummeting of salaries. So the only way out is just to do this personalized social support, and so the ministry and government, so they're making every effort to do that, and so we need to set up new criteria. So because I'm not talking about the minimum wages, it's a more comprehensive approach. So what the specialists refer to as is it the flow has changed or the reserves have changed? So, meaning that if you have become an unemployed, but you have a country house and a dacha, so do we need to support this guy? So do we have just to ask this guy who has lost his job to sell his car before he will be entitled to a certain social support? So that's why so it's a more comprehensive approach. So we have certain groups of people who are in economic distress, so families with low incomes, the most vulnerable groups, and we have our own list of people, and we need to concentrate on the most vulnerable groups of people who require financial support. So how do we do we save because of this personalized nature of support? So we'll be able to save. So if we take out the pension component, so we won't be able to save any money on that, because we need to redistribute and more efficiently use this system and target our financial support to those who really need it. But the pension problem, which has taken the major weight of increase of social support, so we need just to use it employing different mechanisms. So first is raising pension age, decreasing the benefits for the pensions, so do the proper financial testing and taking the labor stock and the job number stock, and about indexing. Will the salaries be indexed or not? Because we're going to lose 1 trillion rubles in proceeds because of the barrel only $30. So if it's 30, 35, so how can we possibly index the people's pensions if the barrel of oil costs only $30? And so we're losing so much in oil proceeds. And so we won't be able to index it properly. So then, for example, 2016, we have earmarked this indexation. So if it were at 12%, so because inflation is 12%, and the salaries will be indexed at 12%, so about 660 billion rubles of additional expenditures and additional transfer will be required. So remembering this, so then the labor fund, and the salaries fund, and so the price gaps in the pension systems, it's almost 700 billion rubles. It will be, where do we take the 700 billion rubles, which is 660 billion rubles for our country? It's, because our higher education is 600 billion rubles. So the federal part of healthcare is 300 billion. So these are the subsidies. So 660 billion rubles. This is the price. So it's more than we spend on higher education. So now we decided to go for 4% increase of salaries of pensions. And then we froze another part of the accumulated part of the pension. We just froze that part, and it looks like the expenditures are not increasing. But we're not talking about the accumulated part of the pension. So it would keep it. So when it just to compensate for the loss of 300 billion rubles, so next year plus do the indexing of pensions. So it would do the annual indexing and forecasted inflation this year, next year. So then they will need additional pension transfers to the pension system. We need just to pump into the pension system more than 1 trillion rubles in order to maintain and to honor our commitments. And then this maternity capital, this mother capital. And so then the format of social support, that is not very targeted, actually. It's even 2-3 kids, it's okay, but I think that it's not very targeted. I think it's a good idea that it's been extended. It's been extended by. I think I would go for the redistribution of some of the maternity money to support the children of the more needy families. So that would be more efficient to support. So and then we'll be able to spend less resources at the same time to support the families with more than 3 children who in reality require that kind of maternity support. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you calculated everything. So you've done it all. Now it's everything clear and nice and obvious and written on the wall. And then you've given some available resources. What country can spend and can't spend, can afford and can't afford. Thank you very much. So lots of questions, and I really want just to ask you a few questions for me. It's unexpected. So the last thing that I expected from you, so that you not want to support the idea of paying pensions to. Not paying pensions to the working pensioners, but I thought that you would be against it, and I thought that you would agree to extend the maternity capital, but you are against it, and I did not expect that you would support so keeping the pension for the working pensioners, etc. So, but the paradox is that so the demographic successful development and it's a very proactive policy in demographic policy. And so, but still, so the families are very poor, and we need to learn to conduct a certain policy concerning not only the older generation, but the younger generation as well. Because because the lion's share of money is spent for the pensioners, and we're forgetting about the young people. Because of productive age, so then fertile age, and so that's why, because they are the ones that will be supporting the elderly, and unfortunately, so the least amount of resources is invested in the younger generation, in the younger people rather than the older people. Well, I'm for the maternity capital, but not in this present shape. I think that we need just to provide financial support medicine, education, healthcare, and education. This is what we need to target, personalize, because this model of the maternity capital that appeared so during the fat years, so because we worked on the assumption that there were additional resources. So let's support the housing construction, and so because we could afford that, just support them until the families will be able just to buy their own housing, and during the so plentiful years it was so until so those families so find themselves good accommodation, and but then. But that actually extended so by 3-4 years. But the birth of a child, so we need immediately provide. So exactly, we need to provide economic support immediately after the child is born, so that they could draw the money and spend it for buying the essentials for the newly born child in the family. So then, so other participants want to jump in. And Olga Yurievna Batalina, she represents this socially oriented state. Olga Yurievna is a legislator whose function is to bring us closer to the socially oriented state, per se. What's your view? What were the discussions concerning the so increasing pensions, indexing pensions? So very serious issues. So because the irony of the situation is that the poorest are the families with children. But the highest risks of impoverishment during this crisis certainly falls to the pensioners. And so for a number of subjective, objective reasons. And so because we abandon indexing pensions, but at the same time the risk of impoverishment is increasing, so we won't be able to support the pensioners' incomes and their salaries. How can you comment on that? I suggest to start with so with this so what the Russian looks like. So let's give this comprehensive portrait. So because so there are expenditures depending on the state, some not dependent on the state. So the thing is that unfortunately we have this different vectors in revenues and expenditures because the revenues are decreasing because the economic situation. And but at the same time, but the state unfortunately continues to increase expenditures that falls on the shoulders of our people. So the purchasing power, November to November, went down 5.4%. So disposable income, you've seen it on the slide. So about the real salary reduction, you've seen about 9-10% reduction, and so we know that. So then the pensions are not properly increased, and so then the salaries and the military salaries as well, wages, they're not increasing anymore. So this is this fait accompli. So then the relationship between the minimum payment and the poverty line, and so this is the labor code point that we cannot honor and have not been able to honor for a certain period of time. And so thus a person has a choice. A working man is poor. This is the first nonsensical approach that unfortunately is part of the Russian state reality, state Russian policy. So a person can work and can make salary, which cannot guarantee so the minimum amount required to survive. And so this is why we need just to bring these two indicators closer, because this is a state signal, because we don't have many people who get the minimum salary. So, but the fact that the state allows for this, so is a good indication of inefficiency of the state on this issue. because people make money, but they cannot survive. So then, monthly, support for a child. So 33% to 29% went down. So these are the families with children. The expenditures. So the current consumption. So food, non-alcoholic drinks. The statistics show plus 18% growth of consumption. But we know that in the real consumption of a specific person, so this dynamics is negative because the forex change, and so then the increase of price for imported and the food prices. So then the payment for kindergartens is going up, and so the regional authorities regulate the prices plus 17%. So kindergarten services went up. So then healthcare, transportation costs, then healthcare services went up. Then the passenger transportation cost. So then, for example, so then the car insurance went up as well. So an average payment for cars plus 50% of insurance, car insurance. Plus 5,000 rubles. So then payment for parking, so the increase of gasoline in price, etc. So all these things. So then maintenance of housing. So plus 16, utilities plus 16. Then the maintenance services plus 15. So then runs in line with inflation. 2016 there'll be more payments. So this is the real estate tax, land tax. So then differentiated scale of payment for power, and so the Ministry of Energy so provides so then special payments for the access to the power lines, etc. What do we need to do here? So because we need just to have a certain moratorium for any state decisions related to the increase of financial burden on a person. So because if we fail to make more money to increase the state revenues, so we need just to figure it out why we're not doing that, and not just to shift the financial responsibility on the shoulders of the population. And to stop it and put it on a moratorium basis. And I think that we need to, so for example, to stop introducing the differentiated method of paying for power, for electrical power, and so because the rates that we're paying for electricity can be put in doubt too. And so there is no logic just to introduce a special subscription a fee for the use of power lines, for the connection, because it makes no sense. And so this is the signal to the state policy. So if we decide just to think about a person, and in the center of this and the social policy, there is always a person, and there's a Russian population. That's why we need to think about that. And so the land tax, so on the basis of the cadastre assessment, so then the cadastre assessment is quite different, and we need just to think how much we're getting just to tax our population for the land they own, and so that is why the real estate tax and the land tax we need to reconsider, because now they are suggesting just to introduce the unified standardized cadastre assessment.
And probably so far, until the discussion about the models of cadastre evaluation is open, I believe we cannot allow new experiments on the population. I believe this is going to be quite a substantial amount in the payment requirement for the people. So until we create the sustainable growth of income for the population, it's too early to introduce. So I believe that's another pivotal stone in our parliamentary activities. So now we discuss also the question if we should change the social standards. So today, for the social laws on pensions, social benefits are all built in expectations of good times, and they were adopted during so-called fat years, and now during the lean years in this current economic situation should be revised, the public policy and the state approaches to ensuring our social benefits and social policies. So we stand on this point of view that we shouldn't. And now we are in the transition period. And that's how we live by, and now, during this situation, if we change the social policy approaches, we shall not be able to come back to them. I do not see any sufficient accumulated threat that would force us to do it. That's why we have now these transition laws to help us to live through, to survive this economic turbulence that unfortunately is not subject to any forecasts, so cannot be forecasted in terms of length and duration. So, but I believe that one day it's going to change, and we understand the issue with the population income. We are still trying to make pointed decisions that will increase the income in the socially vulnerable groups. For instance, we increase the benefits for the families with people for people with disabilities, for capital repair, so people of age over 70, over 80. Then we raised the tax benefits. We streamlined we reduced the tax benefits for the families with special children with disabilities, and so now this, since 2008, was 280,000 rubles. Now it's 350. So it gives the families a possibility to pay less taxes. Since January, we introduced new ways to use the maternity capital that can be now used for rehabilitation and socialization of children with disabilities. And again, I remind you, this is the second indexation is the law. It's going to happen because it is the law, federal law. We are not discussing it now if it's going to happen. We are only discussing the size, because by law we are bound to have it. And this is the decision that we shall make after thorough calculation of our financial capacity and in the third quarter, depending on the economic situation in the first half a year. But there is no doubt about it, because this is the law, direct federal law, that has to be observed. And I would like to remind you that a pension in the modern Russia is a source for the personal income. But again, this is the source of income for the family of this retired person. 42 million of retired people, of pensioners in Russia. So definitely this money exceeds 100 million rubles, and we need to ensure sustainability of this number, of this income. This is a priority. That's why we insisted on the second indexation, so that it would help us to reduce the risks of inflation that would definitely hit the retired people. And again, indexation of other special benefits, and that's why we're going to perform it, to do it in February. Again, we cannot see any positive developments in the labor market, so the situation is kind of sustainable. But the number of people that many companies intend to lay off, approximately 300,000 people, and again, there are so many people who have to work part-time, and so they cannot work the full week because the companies cannot afford it. So I understand there are more speakers, and considering what the previous speaker said, I have to be concise as for the target groups, as for differentiation. For the people who need the support, the minister is absolutely right. There are no benefits, that just, we're shooting blind. I mean, we always know who needs our support. At this moment, it is difficult to redistribute the money, for instance, to the families with children. We have many types of regional policies. The only thing that we still kept at the federal level is demographic payments. All those demographic benefits are federal. This is the direct law, number 81. That's why the maternity capital, the one-time baby birth benefit, and the insurance until the baby turns 1.5 years. They are federal, and we don't have any differences, regional, local differences, no doubts that they're going. And as a result, we see sustainable demographic growth because the federal obligations, the federal commitment creates stability. There is no volatility. There is no local specifics. So the planning and having a child is a decision that requires sustainability at the top level. And it creates the feeling that the public policy is targeted at the support of family and children and the maternity capital. Do we need to change it? This is a double-sided coin. Maternity capital can be turned into social payments, as said, but immediately it will kind of disintegrate. It's going to be a social support measure to support families with a low income level. Do we need it? Do we need to do it? Yes, definitely. But the logic of maternity capital disappears because the maternity capital that would be kind of disintegrated into monthly payments stops being a strategic lump sum of money. And we need, then in this case, we shall have to stop it and start something new, start something else, to use the same money, the same finance, and in this case, we just rename it. We were suggesting an intermediary measure. At this very moment, it has not yet found any support in the economic bloc. I believe that there are very few ways to use it. One of the best ways to use the maternity capital is to use it for your housing. This is very efficient. But as for education of the mother, pensions and things like that, mothers don't go for it. They go for using this money usually to improve their housing conditions. So why don't we provide the opportunity to use the maternity capital? At least now during the crisis, they can use 20,000 rubles. For instance, if the mother needs to improve the living conditions, she can do it. But again, we believe we could make a wider list of use cases for the maternity capital, because at this moment, this list is very restricted. So as for the working retired people, so who get their pension and keep working, we cannot afford to cancel those pensions because the older generation is still the retired generation now is the very highly educated generation. They do a lot. They have a very important function, and when they work, this is a treasure, and the young people does not want to undertake this function. So we are now talking about working pensioners in terms of non-indexation. But after they stop working, definitely his pension will increase for all the indexes that had been applied during his working activity. So now the saving part, it's only a voluntary method. If a person wants to have additional saving, definitely a person can do so, but it has to be his own decision. When we deduct some funds from the pension and send them to the saving fund, the federal budget cannot provide the complete transfer to the pension fund. We reduce the ratio. We make the pension cheaper because of this pension ratio. When we say that we want that the public pension after retirement, a person would get another 25 to 30% of accumulated pension of saving component. So what's going to be the public pension? So if we don't deduct, it's going to be higher, and that's clear because the law says that we use the inflation index. Show me a pension fund that would show income at the inflation level. We don't have it yet. So, and we do not expect to have it due to economic reasons. There's no time to talk about it. So therefore, the insurance component grows in a more dynamic manner than the saving component. So the saving component should be absolutely at the discretion of the person. So we need it, but it has to be optional. And the last thing that I wanted to add, we need to learn from our mistakes. But today I still have an impression that our approaches to the social policy by the economic bloc is, the approach of the search for the opportunities to save, but not to raise the efficiency of the social expenditures. Because the efficiency does not only mean extracting the money, but redistribution of the money and some new benefits and payments. So far, we have not seen the beginning of such a process. And in our public policy, we need to start analyzing the internal processes and additional support of families with children, and probably think that this type of support might become federal. Because what I see in the regions, the local discrepancy in the qualities and quantity of the social payment, definitely it raises questions from the people, because there is no fairness and predictability of the public policy. Once we have it, then the policy is right. Thank you, Olga Yurievna, and so we could ask you some questions, but we don't have enough time, and we have two more presenters, and we understand that the social policy is a regional business, and how the Russian regions feel, how the crisis impacted them, how they cope with the social policy. So it's a very important question, and today we have an opportunity to speak at length about a very special region that is very different from others. That is the Northern Caucasus. And today we have Lev Kuznetsov, Minister on the Northern Caucasus affairs, with this is a very special region with special social environment. So could we please hear from you on on the specifics of this region and this kind of hub, and how we can address the issues in the Northern Caucasus? So let me start with the federal outlook, because the Caucasus is part of our countries, and many differences still falling within the general trend. And first thing I want to say that the federal and regional measures of supports should be there, because if we look at the North and the Far East and the Caucasus, we need to provide the regions, to empower the regions to, to make their own political decisions that would help to address and resolve the social tensions and issues. So I believe I used to be a governor, and I know for sure that the local authority and empowerment allows the regions to help the ones who are in need. And what the state needs to do, we need really to make sure that we help the people who do need the support. For instance, if we take the attorney's office, we can use it as a case and see that we can help exactly the people who require this assistance. And so indeed, the real income of the population keeps dropping. And we need to consider the ways to legalize the so-called gray income in the Caucasus and other regions. There are so many issues, so additional income for the budget employees. So people usually work and conceal. We know how many people, especially in the education, they provide additional services. This is good, but let it be white. Let it be in the show, you know. So at least we shall know the actual numbers. Because in many cases we just know about their official salary, but the turnover in these gray sectors are quite high. So, and again, we need to correlate it with the people who need the real support. We were comparing the real salaries to 2009. So we have this in 2009 there was no such a sharp drop in the exchange rate and the prices growth. So I believe that in the government we keep discussing, and within the budget we need to identify the sectors, the industries that could bridge this gap and change our dollar dependency, hard currency dependency. And in the Caucasus, we say that by 2020, we need to ensure the food safety of the region and the country. And we are now talking about the restriction of the trade surcharge. Maybe indirectly, because in the agricultural cost structure, we have 90% of the Russian component, but the price for the product doubles in the retail outlet, and the producer gets nothing, but the retail chains get a very good capitalization. So we need to consider the proper distribution. If we look at the pharmaceutical industry, again, the situation is similar. The very high added component to the price in the retail change. So we need to consider, we need to really make changes in those segments. As for the children, I am a father with kids more than 3, and children are very expensive nowadays. If you wanted to raise them properly and educate them, it is not cheap. But I will disagree with Maxim that socially oriented state is a declaration. If we consider the measures of public support and the capacities and opportunities that the state provides, it's very different. It has improved greatly to the 10 years back situation. And our mission is not to lose it, is to improve it, to take it further to the next step, make it fair, make sure that additional education at schools would be provided actually, but not just on paper. So healthcare, again, it should be there. It should be present in the places where we really need it. And we need to improve the standards. We need to educate a person. So, for instance, the we need to improve the situation in the hospitals. So, for instance, we reduced the waiting list for the expected for the operation, for the surgery from 2 months to 2 weeks. People are still unhappy. So, people very rarely appreciate what they're getting. In the healthcare, we have special beds in hospitals for the people who cannot pay. We have so many beds in the rural areas. We have to probably take them out because we can reduce the costs, and therefore this kind of targeting and creating categories, creating transparent mechanism is a two-way road. In the Caucasus, many issues are much more acute than because we see with the demographic situation, we are very good in terms of fertility ratio. We have very good indicators on natal mortality. So babies survive on a greater scale. So, and until recent times, the main investments into social policies provided the wider social basis. But we understand we cannot just increase the number of people that we cover. This is a very expensive way, and it will take us nowhere. So we decided to focus on developing the real economic sector in the industries where we are competitive, and we understand the priority. And take, for instance, agriculture. 70% of our people live in rural areas and have relevant culture and traditions and religion. And so we can increase the employment ratio and the food safety, and so reduce the burden, or rather redistribute the goods from total equal distribution to those who really need it. And the second part, we understand we cannot only address it in one region, and we shall have a roundtable discussion today. Historically, the Caucasus was the kind of brain supplier and the human capital supplier. So our second mission is to create the proper educational system for other regions and to make it efficient. And the third thing, so we need to understand the priority of the real economic sector, but we still have issues in other industries. There are so many waiting lists to the preschool education, and there are still children who go to school in the late afternoon, which is not good. And we have the new documents that are now under consideration in the government that about the special territories with special needs, or kind of specific types of development. So there will be special blocks in the laws, and that will consider those disproportionate situation, and there will be special decisions. It does not mean more money. allocated to separate regions. It means that there will be some industry indicators that may be different from the mean Russian indicators that will motivate the industry ministers and help them to identify the issues and raise the efficiency of the use of money. And, and the social investments take the Krasnoyarsk region, so 3 hours flight from the south to the north, but the Caucasus are much more compact. So as for the social investment and social infrastructure, we need to consider both the regional level and efficiently use the medical centers.
And other medical centers, sports institutions.
Проекты. Потому что у нас до этого каждый хотел иметь у себя всю палитру.
And every region wanted to have the whole gamut of healthcare system. Certainly, so there's basic medical schools, so understand that. That's what the regions should have. And the centers of social protection support. But if it's okay, but if it's more expensive sites and assets, so we need just to consider how much they will cost. And whether the region can afford it, and so but we just and we need to take it outside the dimension of a region, and so then we plan the social investments. So we need to optimize the capex and then opex as well to optimize and streamline these 2 points, and especially remembering about the interregional specifics, and so then availability, accessibility for the population of those assets. And then the relevant quality needs to be provided as well, and these components to follow up on that, and in spite of the limitations of budget investments, so to still just so for example, certainly we already just saw the infant mortality is reducing. And so the number of so students that have to go to school 3 shifts, so first, second, third shift. So this third shift is decreasing, and so then in agriculture and in industry, so then the productivity of labor is increasing, and so then the agricultural production is growing as well. So not so fast as we would like it to grow, and so that is why so regionally, so we're trying just to reflect the government efforts. And then the last thing I wanted to point out, so when we look at the expenditure program and the structure of expenditure, so what's important, so when I worked as a governor, so we don't look at so the absolute amount of expenditure. For example, so how many additional cell phone appeared, and so the population bought. And so they were just but realistically, so how many more cell phones people buy? So how much you're paying for utilities every month? So who knows how much you pay for utilities? So raise your hands. Let's see the hands of those who knows how much they pay. So less than half know how much they pay for the utilities, and so it's a good indicator, because we do have some things, like social services, and they weren't afraid to invest in those things. And if we do not make these investments, it will be a horrible debacle. But at the same time, no one calculates how much money people spend on utilities, for example, and people, for example, so have to pay for some services provided by the state, much less than they pay a monthly fee for cell phone usage, or they have no idea how much they pay for utilities. So I did that. Same statistics in the rural population, urban population, so they don't count certain items of expenditure. And so then we're talking about not only social technologies, but it has IT services. IT services. For example, so once the mobile banking appeared, so now just I'm not in arrears in payment for my utilities, because it's the money is debited automatically from my bank account. It's very convenient now. but the pensions. So because if we don't pay pensions to the pensioners immediately, so the utilities areas will start to grow, because the pensions is a safety cushion in the area of minimum spending. That is why that's the key issues. And so I liked one of the programs. So we need just to make those who have to pay, because there are people who do not want to pay though they can pay, and those who do not pay because they cannot pay. So social unprotected groups, and so we need to force those who can pay pay. And at the same time, so we need just to guarantee a stable operation of the industries of the national economy, on which are important for the survival of the people. So the regional. I remember so then the crisis 2009 and 10, and when we with Natalia Vasilyevna were putting together so the social atlas of the Russian regions, so putting it together. And so that crisis, we monitored it with the help of a regional component, so a regional atlas. So now the situation about faced completely different. And I don't think that we should just liken one to the other, but Natalia Vasilyevna, she taught us to understand so that the regional dimension of social processes gives us the right for proper social diagnosis. And so your impressions, to what extent is painful for the Russian regions, and what we see from the regional picture, regional dimension, and give us some forecasts. So how serious, how deep the implications might be for the population living in the Russian regions. There's two subjects. So the life of people and the budget. So they are interrelated. So then about the life of people, the population of Russia, practically in all the regions. So they are adapting to the crisis. And at the same time, so they're reducing consumption. That's it. So they are adjusting. And then now just we went down to the consumption that we had 10 years ago. And it's not the end of story yet, because the consumption will continue to decrease. And so that's a minus 13% consumption in retail. And then the second, so we should not scare people with the labor market creeping crisis. Stop scaring people with that. And I think that the ministry is doing is correctly when they address this issue correctly. But no one what's going to happen. Maybe it will evolve into a different crisis, because it's the crisis about our lifestyle, about our lives, and to a lesser extent about consumption. I can tell you about the budget, so because we were locking horns about the big principles, so we were fighting for good things against bad things. But let me talk about the crisis, because we have to live through this crisis, not for 1-2 years. So we need to understand the real picture. So we started out that at the end of the 2000s, so when we started to get a lot of oil money, so we gave a lot to the regions, and every year we said spend on this, spend on this. So they always were telling exactly what to spend the money on from the federal level. And so then there was a lot of oil money, but the money stopped coming. So then there were orders. So 70% of all expenditures fell on the as the burden of the regions. And so now the oil money went down, and the only way to survive is to reduce the strict regulation from above, from the government. So if there is no money, give us freedom. So the problem is, this is a good logical freedom, free freedom or stupid freedom. So if you cannot finance us anymore from the center, from the federal level, give us freedom. And so those who help to fight the Attorney General, because they don't understand that only by increasing the level of freedom, so you can adjust the situation for the better. And then the picture. And then in real life, so there are lots of risks. But So the debt of the regions is 2.5 trillion. And whatever the Ministry of Finance does, so it's a 41% debt. And so they're all just part of the credits of the banks. So, and the debt went up 5%, but nothing changed. The structure has remained the same. The debt is the same. So in 51 regions, so the debt is more than half of all the tax proceeds, tax revenues. So they say that we have the surplus, but no, the 70% of the surplus is Moscow and Sakhalin. But in the regions, 48% of the regions, so they have a budget deficit, and so budget surplus only in 2 regions. So that is why so many unpopular decisions are transferred onto the shoulders of the regions. So the federal authority should explain what they respond, because when simultaneously so have to spend money on roads, support the agriculture, so they increased investment 14%, and we need to do something with the social protection, and the regions are confused. They don't know what to spend their money. So then the reduction of expenditures. So the reduction of utilities and expenditures for education, 41, culture, 42 regions. So healthcare reduction, so 18 regions are doing better, but the rest are much worse. And social policy, only 14 regions reduced their payments because they stopped to pay the money after the flood was over. So then it's all coming up. It's just getting off the ground. It's gonna get worse. So, for example, education. So in Gushetia, so if how can you just reduce school costs if the number of students is increasing? And how can a 70% increase social benefits if your governor cannot be properly elected? And so we're talking about the systemic things, and the systemic things are as follows. So the reduction of main social services will not lead to they will not be exchanged by payment services, or only for most important things, like when you start to die, so they will pay. So because if you shrink the market, it will not be replaced by paid services, and we need to understand that. And then midterm strategy needs to be identified, how to get out of the crisis, how the regions behave. So what to spend on and what to save on. So then 10 months of 2015, but 25 regions. So they decided to increase social spending. Okay, so they will go to the Ministry of Finance, will start to ask for more investment, for more financing, less than 10% of the regions. So they immediately kill all social support indicators. So then there are some cynical but smart regions. Those are the regions who want just to increase investment attractiveness, and their social spending is very moderate. So Moscow just goes down to the moderate social spending format. So the two main has always been moderate in spending on social benefits. Kaliningrad, Belgorod did the same, and this is the decision of the local authorities. This is the long-term strategic outlook, strategic view. But if you look at the 2/3 of the regions, so then their actions completely disparate. They're very confused. They don't know what to save on, what to spend on. And that's the time, not even just to support about the priorities. Give them a free hand to decide their priorities. So give them more freedom. Provide them with state-of-the-art experience. Many are confused. They don't know what to do. And that is why so then imbalances can be corrected, and the relationship between the federal region and the regions, because we eventually will have to give more freedom to the regions, eventually, one way or the other. So thank you for the clear-cut presentation. A very good statement, and I have no time to sum up the results because everyone wanted to listen to the head of the government. And but very quickly, I would like to say a few points. that we spoke about. All of us agreed that the social policy will be more efficient if is targeted. And so the government agreed, and so tomorrow just will start moving over to the personalized social support. But we need there's a caveat, so you cannot just build this personalized approach in the social sphere in one day, because it takes money and it takes time, and we cannot build the system immediately. And even if it's built and ready to go, we'll immediately save money before we start getting certain revenues. So we need to create information institutions, financial institutions that will help to put together this more targeted system of social support. And then it will work. It will start to pay back. So we need just to build this social treasury. So because how can you possibly check 60 million families from the viewpoint of how needy they are and whether they need support or not support? So only on the basis of modern technologies we can do that. That will streamline this process. I need to identify where to spend. So even if trying just to prevent the increase of poverty of the Russian population, we need to remember that the pension system will either the social protection and the prevention of poverty among the pensioners, or creating this the insurance pension, and create a certain another approach, another vista. So we need just to look at this dilemma and remember that fighting poverty among the pensioners is important, but at the same time we need to remember about keeping the insurance nature of the pension system in Russia. So one should not overshadow the other. And so I'm not just wrapping up the discussion, we're just opening up the discussion what to do with the social nature of modern economic crisis. Thank you, and thank you to all those who listened. And I think that it's been a very important and weighty discussion. Thank you.